The new Magic the Gathering set, Forgotten Realms D&D, introduces several new cards to Magic the Gathering, including the dungeons and the dragons. And even though it's only halfway through spoiler season, I've decided to make a prediction that this dungeon, Tomb of Annihilation, will be the best dungeon. You see, the way the dungeon mechanic works, as adequately explained by Wizards of the Coast.
If you venture into the dungeon while you're not in a dungeon, you take a dungeon card from outside the game and put it into the command zone.
As I said, a very accurate and very succinct explanation of how it works. Wait, did they say the command zone?
And put it into the command zone.
So like I said, I examined these dungeons very, very closely, and I've decided this one is definitely going to be the strongest, because it creates a 4/4, and also deals your opponent some damage. Now by the strongest, I do not mean that this is going to be the strongest card in the set, I just simply mean that this is probably the strongest dungeon in terms it will see the most play and be the most annoying when it comes out. I'll get into why I think that a little bit later on in the video, but for now let's look over the strongest cards in the set. As we all know, every single card that you put in your deck also comes at an opportunity cost. This means that that card is going to be replacing another card, which could be doing something else. So you want the best cards to be the cards that take up those opportunity slots. You have 60 of them, and that's how this game works. So why have I been putting lands on the screen? Well, you see, lands come at a very low opportunity cost. For example, Den of the Bugbear. Wait, come back! Den of the Bugbear is what is commonly known as a man land. Even though it's a bugbear, but okay, sure. The advantage of a man land is that it allows you to run an additional creature without actually having to add a creature to your deck. You just add a land that is a creature. The disadvantage of most man lands is that they enter the battlefield tapped. However, the cycle from this set do not. The best part about this ability is that it comes into play untapped if you control very few lands. So if this is your first or second land drop, then this is just a mountain with upside. Now I think it is worth pointing out that Hall of the Storm Giants is not actually as good as the Bugbear one. For one thing, there really isn't such a thing as an aggressive mono-blue deck, or at least there isn't a very competitive one. And for the second, it costs like a ton more mana. So not only is there actually going to be a downside because your island entering tapped on turn 3 is actually pretty obnoxious, it is also going to be a lot harder to pull off the benefit of having this card in your deck. So I don't think this is actually that good. However, speaking of cards that are actually kind of good, Hive of the Eye Tyrant is a 3/3. It costs the same as the Bugbear one to activate. In any kind of aggressive mono-black deck, this is just good. I mean, it doesn't even have to be mono-black, it just has to be aggressive. But moving on to the most important thing about this set is actually the card names. So many of these cards are just hilarious, like just the name. First up, you see a pair of goblins. Yes, there is actually now a magic card named You See a Pair of Goblins. And it's good in draft, and possibly in standard. Very possibly even in commander, if you're playing a deck that cares about goblins and creatures and actually wants to be attacking. It's good because it's very versatile. It allows you to either create creatures or buff your creatures. It can either win the game or help you build a board presence. And it'll create 2 different creatures rather than just one creature, so your opponent can't kill it. It's very versatile. Along with the other strangely named cards, like Choose Your Weapon, which either kills a flyer or doubles your creature's power. Yet again, it can either be useful or it can win the game. Another very good card is You Come to a River. It can either make a creature unblockable, or it can get rid of one of your opponent's things. Just temporarily, but it still gets rid of it. Into the Royal is already fairly playable in Commander just on its own. And this is an Into the Royal, but without the draw, but with the added ability of just being able to win the game if you have a big creature. Continuing on to other strangely named cards, You Find the Villain's Lair is actually surprisingly versatile. It can draw you 2 cards and discard 2 cards. It can also counter a spell. However, I don't think this card is that good just simply because its mana cost is not worth either of those effects. Thus, I predict that it will see about as much play as Is It Charm. Now, You Find a Cursed Idol is actually really good. It can either be a naturalize effect, or it can give you a treasure token and venture into the dungeon. This is a Prismari command's levels of versatility. However, it does have one flaw, and that is that it's sorcery speed. Obviously, depending on what level of the dungeon you're at will give you different effects, but even if you don't have any other venture cards in your deck, this can still get you either 1 life, 1 scry, or make each player lose 1 life. Actually, this card's kind of bad. Moving on to other bad cards that have to do with the dungeon mechanic, we have 50 Feet of Rope, which is just so, whoa, that's awesome. 50 Feet of Rope has 3 different abilities, which are each named after the 3 things that you can primarily use rope for in D&D, which is just, amazing. I love that flavor. You can either climb over the wall, you can, of course, tie someone up, or you can rappel down into the dungeon. It's just so nice, and, 50 Feet of Rope is now a card. It's not a good card, though. But of course I've saved the best for last, or maybe it's the worst. I'm not sure, it kind of depends on your taste. But either way, +2 Mace is now a card, and it was printed in black border. Yes, there is now a actual magic card called +2 Mace. And of course I predict that this card is going to be very, very strong in draft. Probably not in any other format, but in draft this is going to destroy your opponents by making one of your creatures +2/+2. But of course, Forgotten Realms, just like every recent set, has also given us several good cards that will just become staples in formats. For example, MAGUS of the GAIAS CRADLE. Wait, they called it Circle of Dreams Druid. Okay, I mean, that sounds kind of cool, but why isn't it called MAGUS of the Cradle? Well, anyway, this card is good. Growing Rights of Itlimoc is like $30. It was undervalued when it was first out, and now it's like, whoa, that went up fast. Tapping for a green for each creature you control is just really good, apparently. But moving on to cards that will probably see standard play, we have Icingdeath the Frost Tyrant. Now, Icingdeath, when it dies, it turns into Icingdeath wait, it turns into Icingdeath? Okay, sure. Oh, I've been reading it wrong. It's Icingdeath, whatever. Anyways, it's a creature that turns into a decent equipment, actually. I think this could be good in cube. You'll just have to make sure you have the token on hand for the equipment, because that's a lot of text to remember. Now, of course, it wouldn't be a D&D set if we didn't get a legendary demon creature, okay? Anyway, this creature is kind of cool. I really just love this. There isn't really another thing that does this. It's a board wipe on your commander, but it also is like a resurrection win thing. I just like it. Of course, it wouldn't be a recent set without a mono-white commander that's actually playable. This card looks fun. I'm sure a lot of people are going to talk about this a lot, and so I'm going to leave my thoughts there. Of course, Wizards has also given Mill a better sanity grinding. I think this is a much better sanity grinding. I kind of like this card, except in draft it's going to be obnoxious and annoying. Speaking of obnoxious and annoying, here's a card that no one's going to play, except for the really annoying people who play it to be annoying. I think this is definitely going to be a collector card. It's probably going to be a very valuable card. I do not like this card. It's just badly designed. It's not fun. And it's not fun for anyone. And to disillusion you, I will explain why. You see, if you roll badly, you will discard your hand, which kind of just means you lose. However, if you roll a natural 20, you will get a creature out. And of course, if you roll something in the middle, you'll just get some value, I guess. It's a card that I guess you could put into a deck as a draw spell. I mean, I guess it could see a little bit of play in decks that just don't care about having cards in their hand, like a Madness deck, or just a bad deck that doesn't care about... Why would you not care about having cards in your hand? This card costs so much mana, you're only going to be playing it in Commander. And aside from the fact that it goes against the main strategies of that format, like, not even strategies, the main things that you need to do, like draw cards, it also just has an unfun ultimate ability where an opponent just loses the game. It's like playing Door to Nothingness, and people don't generally play Door to Nothingness. And if they do, it's kind of cool. So I guess if you win with this, it's kind of cool because you're rolling nat 20. Okay, maybe I don't hate this card that much. I just don't think it's the best way they could have done Deck of Many Things. You did my baby wrong, man. Moving on from disappointments to something they did really well. I love this commander. I mean, Simic has a lot of good commanders. It's kind of a meme, but this is just good, and it's not good because it's powerful. It's good because it's actually well designed. It's anti-tribal. It's so fun. Just looking at this, I got my brain moving, and that is what I want from a card. The video's still going, isn't it? Yeah, right, because I said I was going to talk about it, and I am going to talk about it, and now I'm going to talk about it. The dungeon mechanic is kind of draft, but it's also really, really cool, and I like it a lot. If anything is going to make this sad mechanic playable outside of draft, it's this card. This card is kind of hard to play in draft because it's a rare, but it's a first strike death touch, and every time it attacks, you get to venture into the dungeon. So after a couple of attacks, you might have actually completed a dungeon, and that buffs some other cards, and maybe makes them playable. It does not. However, draft is a format, and if you've decided you want to play Dungeons & Dragons in your Magic the Gathering game, then you're going to complete that dungeon no matter what it takes, even if you're going to play cards that are not that good. But first things first, I'm going to showcase some cards that are actually good in draft, just on their own, and then they also happen to venture into the dungeon. This is what I think the actual good adventure deck is going to be. This deck is the reason that I think Tomb of Annihilation is actually going to be the best dungeon. But let's talk about Bar the Gate. Now, Bar the Gate is a instant speed venture into the dungeon spell, which is nice because it allows you to do things like snap out a 4/4 at instant speed, which is always nice. However, the key thing about this card is that it's actually playable in draft. And if you're holding mana back, if you have, say, some flash stuff going on, it's really good. And it happens to venture into the dungeon. Speaking of flash, this set decided that it would give every single color a 2-cost uncommon that was actually really good and made you look at it and go, huh. Only blacks gets a huh, which is really about all you need to hear. But one of them destroys stuff, and the other one is a 5/3 for 2 mana. That's almost as good as Tarmogoyf, except it can get killed easily. But moving back to dungeons, if you are going all out for a dungeon, Dungeon of the Mad Mage is probably the best dungeon. It allows you to draw 3 cards, free cast them. That's amazing. It's still very luck based, so it's not going to win you a lot of games, but it could win you one game really spectacularly, so there's that. The trick is, when you look at this dungeon, you have to compare it to the other dungeon. The best way to do this is to add up all of the different modes and see what the total result is. For Dungeon of the Mad Mage, you've scryed 1, gained 1 life, created a treasure, scryed 2, exiled the top 2 cards of your library, or created 2 goblins, and scryed 3. Just trust me, you're never going to make it that last ability where your opponent can't attack with a creature. Also, you drew 3 cards, and you were able to cast one of them without paying its mana cost. This is probably turn 6 or 7, and let's not forget that you had to venture 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. Now let's compare that to Tomb of Annihilation, where you only have to venture 4 times. As for Oubliette, if you're playing draft, you might as well just erase that part from the card, because do not do that. That is a trap, literally. However, let's total the effect. Well, you've probably lost 3 life, or maybe even 5 life, but you do have a 4/4, and your opponent has also had to make some hard choices, and probably lost some life too. So if your goal is to deal them damage, then you're winning. And remember, the most important part about this is you are playing cards that are also cards. You are not just playing cards built around the dungeon mechanic. You are playing cards that do other stuff, and just happen to include venture into the dungeon as part of the card. I see a 4/2 for 4 that gives value when you play lands. I see a 3/3 flyer that gives you value when you attack. A counter spell, a rather interesting combo that is probably not going to be that good. Yeah, the best part about the dungeon mechanic is that it looks a lot of fun for people to have fun playing Magic, so I'm not going to complain about that. Unfortunately, the whole set is not spoiled yet, so I'm just going to highlight a couple cards that I like a lot. First up, this card is unblockable and it can go in ninjas. Second up, we have the Tarrasque. I just really like the fact they didn't make this card outrageously overpowered, but they still made it good. This is definitely a fun card to hit off your GAIAS. As far as Baneslayer Angel plus haste, I very much like that. Unfortunately, this dragon does lose a little bit of power and a little bit of toughness. It does die to bolt now, but I think that makes it fairer. And the fact that you can War Leader's Helix your opponent every single turn is nice. As for Dawnbringer Cleric, it's not the fact that this card is good, it's the fact that this card has such good flavor that it just... mwah. It is, in fact, an enters the battlefield destroy target enchantment card, so in a lot of cases this is going to be a Reclamation Sage, but it can only target enchantments, which is kind of what I generally target anyways, so yeah. And then of course there's Gelatinous Cube, which aside from going in a cube, because this is definitely going to go in a cube like a lower powered cube, it also has some amazing theme with the fact that it engulfs stuff, and then it dissolves stuff, and just the way the mechanic works with the way the rules interact, it's just, I love it. Last but not least, we have Targnar. Now the reason I love Targnar is because he fits really well into a budget archetype. That budget archetype is budget commanders. I mean, you can build them on a budget, and you can build them fairly effectively on a budget. Obviously, he's not going to be as powerful as some things, but he can still compete with them because he can go under them and then punch them in the face before they are expecting it. Targnar doubles his power, so if you have 4 mana up to double his power, and you have a way of giving him trample, and then you can just plus him by like 6 or something, well, now he's an 8/8. Oh, now he's a 16/16. Now you've just taken them out. And he's also given all your creatures +1/+0 because he attacked. Obviously, I don't think this card is the best. There are better versions. Radha is also a good version, probably a better version, but she doesn't cost as low, and she's not as janky and fun, and she's also a rare, and this is an uncommon. And I really like the idea of Artisan Commander decks. They're just fun to build. I think it's a very interesting creative space that a lot of people haven't tapped yet.